Everywhere we go, people want to know who we are and where we come from. So who are you and where did you come from?
My name is Ruth Barry. I'm originally from Ringsend and I live in Ballyfermot now, nearly the last 4 years.
And Ruth, we have a mutual friend who put us in contact with each other.
We sure do.
Jennifer Fay.
Yeah.
So she was like, you need to talk. And then she was at you to say, you should tell your story to Rebecca. So just full disclosure for a minute is that we have the two girls, my little one and your little one here, and they're up and down the stairs, and if we get an interruption, we get an interruption, guys. What can we do? But yeah, so Jennifer is the connection, and she was saying to me, you should sit down with Ruth. And I was like, okay. So tell me a little bit at the beginning about growing up in Ringsend, how many in the family and so on, and what was that like?
So I was a middle child. I had 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers. And life wasn't always bad. My dad would have been violent at times and there was a lot going on, but I had got a good life. My mum and dad worked. My dad was a carpenter in a hotel and my mum was a chef, and my 2 sisters worked in that hotel as well. For me, my life changed when I was 11. Nearly 11, my sister walked out the door that morning, bent over, gave me a kiss. Her and my mum were having their little dispute over what colour paint to pick on the wall, and now she goes to work. She was literally gone out the door 2 minutes, and my dad came back in the van. She was after getting killed by an articulated lorry, and my dad was 3 cars behind. Our best friend was in the car behind beeping. It went over once, and because the bike was stuck, our clothes were stuck on the bike, it went over again. And it just, from that day, it changed the dynamics of our family. You know, things were never the same. My mum was 8 months pregnant on my little brother, and we would have been, like, my older sister and my sister Deborah would have been brought up like twins. So, you know, it really massively affected her. I would have been closer with Rachel. Michael would have been Deborah's. They would have been so close. And we used to have our little battles. I'd be on Rachel's team, Michael would be on Deborah's team. I always won Michael, Rachel. Deborah always won Deborah, you know. And, you know, things just changed. My dad was in the pub more. You know, it was like my little brother then came 4 weeks later, and it was like, I want my sister back, you know. And as much as I loved him, I was like, you're after giving us something but taking away. And I suppose I put my love into him, and it affected me in school. It affected me behaviour because I was just so angry. My mum and dad tried to do counselling with us. I literally locked myself in the box room, put me back towards the bedroom door and put my feet against the radiator, and they were trying for a good half an hour to try and get me out, and I wouldn't. So they ended up leaving me. I couldn't speak about it. It started affecting my schoolwork, everything. So then there was a club started in Ringsend. It was a triathlon and mountain running club. So my brother was in that, and I started getting involved in that and throwing myself into that. But it was still affecting me in school. Like, I was acting out in school and fighting with people because, you know, teachers would compare you to my sister because, you know, she was just academically and physically.
How old was she?
19.
And your dad was behind the cars? He
was actually supposed to come in to pick my mum up. We seen him coming in and he drove back out. We were like, why is he driving back out? And I never forget it, because his boss drove him to the house and they knocked on the door of my mum, and I was standing behind my mum. And she was like, what's wrong? And because she could see the emotion in him. and the boss. And she was like, is Deborah after splashing herself with oil and muck? And, you know, and he was like, no, she's dead. You know, my mum was like, no. But it ended up she wasn't even supposed to be in work that day.
God.
You know, she worked in the Mount Herbert and Sandymount. It was literally minutes from the house. Like, she literally went down the drainway, went out onto the road, and as she went on the road, he broke the lights. His mirror was gone on this side, and he had alcohol in his system, and he got a £250 fine and appeal to. My mum, one day going to work, she used to work on the Malahide Road in the Goblet.
Yeah.
And my dad was giving her a lift, and they pulled in, and he was in the truck beside them. You know, so it majorly affected our family.
And you said there the dynamic changed completely, which of course it would, but for your mum being pregnant still and then going on to have a new baby, her emotions must have been everywhere.
Deborah was our firstborn, you know. She was our life, you know. And it's mad because the week running up to it, my mum, she kept having these mad visions and dreams, and she was saying something is going to happen to one of my kids, and she thought it was my brother Michael because he was always rambling and going over towards the water where the pool bag is, and she kind of kept him in and was monitoring him, and it ended up it was Deborah. Like, she was like, I can actually physically smell death, you know. You could just, I'm actually sitting here and I can remember, like, my auntie on my dad's side ready to give my mum a cup of tea, and they wanted to put a tranquilizer in it and in order to, you know, help her control it. But she was like, I'm pregnant, don't dare do that, like. And there's not a day goes by that my mum doesn't speak about Deborah or my brother, or you know, that she doesn't come into her life. My mum still religiously goes out to the grave constantly. You know, she was a major impact, and people of Ringsend never seen so many people at a funeral in their life. There was thousands upon thousands of people at her funeral. She was just one of these bubbly, energetic characters that everyone loved. And like my sister Rachel, she was never the same after it. You know, they were like chalk and cheese, but they were like a sticky plaster. She was never the same after that. You know, it's like it just took part of her with her. When I heard, we were living in a 3-story house, I tried to fuck myself out the window and all. My mum's brother and my auntie Phyllis, they were trying to pull me back in the window. I didn't know how to grasp the concept of she was never coming back. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And did the others then, with the baby then, did they struggle with the bond with him, or?
Rachel was great with him. She absolutely idolised him. She kind of was taking on the mummy role, and I was actually recently looking back at pictures of when he was only a few days old, and you could see, you know, the bags under her eyes, and, you know, emotionless, and like, he's the most unbelievable person you could ever meet. Like, he's 31 now, but, you know.
And you said then that you threw yourself into sports.
I actually became female. I won 3 years in a row. I was female mountain runner 3 years consecutive. Yeah, and Slieve na Mon. I used to cycle to the mountain and then he'd make us do the mountain run. Derek Murphy's from Ringsend. And then I got picked to go down to Mayo to do trials for the triathlon to represent Ireland in Spain. And then, you know, I just kind of, I was doing that for a good few years. I kind of just started mixing with different people and you know, starting to, you know, it was Tipex and Tinners and, you know, having a little drink here and there, and slowly kind of pulled away from it. And my brother Michael, he was in it as well, and he used to always say to me, you're only winning all this because there's not many women in it. At the time, like, I was only a junior, but they hadn't got junior teams, so I was racing against women. But it's mad now that that's what I've gone back to doing, you know, so many years later. But yeah, I ended up leaving it and starting off, you know, probably smoking a joint here or there, and eventually that was affecting me in school. And I actually had a fight with someone on Halloween on the midterm, and I actually got put out of school for it, and I ended up in FOSS.
Did you?
So in that FOSS there was people from different areas, and you know, they'd go out and they'd be in the lane smoking their weed on their break, so you're like, yeah, give us some of that, you know, I want to be part of the
cool gang.
Yeah, so it kind of started that, and then I kind of started venturing into town and going into the rave scene at a young age.
Really?
At a very young age. Now, I would often go back to parties with people and they would be smoking heroin, but I didn't for a long, long time with them. And I suppose, as the saying goes, if you sit in a barber shop long enough, you're going to get your hair cut. And that's eventually what did happen, but it took years. I started...
Take me back for a second. What was going on with your mum and dad at this time, and were they watching you and keeping an eye on you, or was your ma like saying, what's going on, Ruth, you know what I mean?
Well, a year after Deborah died, my mum and dad split up, and my dad started a new relationship with someone else. Then eventually my mum was in a relationship with someone else, and I don't think I could, even though, you know, in a way I was kind of like, well, I'm not going to get beatings anymore, and then I was like, but yeah, you still miss that, because I would have been a daddy's girl, you know. My mum was always working, and I just think it took her so long with the grieving process. And my mum's mum died 9-10 months before Deborah died, so within 2.5 years we lost my nanny, Deborah. My dad was gone, and then there was contact with my dad for a few months after that, but then after that there was none, and it was like we lost a whole one side of the family, you know, because we hadn't really got contact with the rest of them then. So it was kind of like you were isolated away from everyone to deal with your dad not being there, to deal with your sister not being there. So
how did you deal with it in that moment? Were you just, is this where the bad behaviours in school and all came in?
I acted out. I acted out at home with my mum. I was going out, I was getting, my God, I was getting out the 3-story bedroom window, hanging down and dropping onto the, where the sitting room goes out onto the roof there, and then I'd drop down off that, and sometimes I wouldn't come back for a day or two, and then I'd come back. Sometimes I'd come back in the middle of the night and I'd be ringing the bell, or sometimes I'd open the with a glazed door and get in. I used to put my hand through the letterbox and open the handle, and I'd sleep in there just in order for them not to wake up, you know, and that was at the age of 16. But
And Rachel at this point, where's Rachel?
She had moved out, I think, at that stage. She had her own place in Pear Street.
So she's not there giving out to you
Yeah.
and telling you what's what now?
Yeah. I would have had a great relationship with Rachel, or I would have sometimes went in and stayed with Rachel.
And then did that hurt your relationship with your mother going forward? But then is that relationship now back on track, or?
It did damage the relationship with my mum, but I do understand that, you know, she was grieving and a lot of stuff was happening. Sometimes you just wanted that hug, you know. Yeah, she did. She has been there to support me through some of my darkest moments. But sometimes it's not the right support. And she will do anything. She's amazing and goes to the ends of the earth for my kids. And that's another story for when we get to that point. But that's something that I'm working on healing at the moment, because I have got mother and father issues, you know, unresolved things that never really get spoken about.
Yeah, I get that. Completely get that. And then tell me then, you said there that you then went into, was it harder drugs then that you went into?
That took a while. Like I was in around town and hanging around like the likes of sides and all that, and I took an ecstasy tablet. My God, I thought I was going to die. I honestly thought I was going to die, like that I was losing my breathing and everything the first time I took it. But it didn't stop me from taking it again.
And is this peer pressure, or is this just you trying to find a release, or trying to, you know, an escapism?
I don't know if it was a release or acceptance or, you know, or peer pressure, call it what you want. I still went out and done it. For me, it's personal choice and you don't have to go down that road. But I chose to. And it took up a good 15, 16 years of my life. You know, and so many different traumatic experiences during that. Then I start, after there, hanging around in town. Like I met one or two that lived in Sheriff Street. There was always kind of a thing where it rings in Sheriff Street, and you know, so it was like going over there or shitting bricks because you're like, I hope I'm not going to get dived on. But I ended up meeting a lad and going out with him for a while and getting up to no good, being in rob cars with the fellas and going down the quays, robbing the containers, squatting on lorries like a tick, like the only girl with them squatting on the lorries. But then like there was one or two other girls. I met some amazing friends. That's where I would have known Jennifer at first. She would have known me in my addiction, like her family would have known me through addiction. And I went out with that lad for a few years, and then I met another lad from down there, and I had two of my kids with him, but that was also violent. And
do you want to tell me about that?
I got many a beating when I was pregnant on my first, and ended up in hospital once or twice because of it. I ended up on heroin just after I had my first, and I used to have her in the harness, and many people witnessed this. I used to have her in the harness, and he physically got me down on the ground while she was in the harness and dragging me and kicking and punching me. And for years I tried to get away from him, and I couldn't. And I forgive him now for what he has done. Like, my daughter has a great relationship with him. My son doesn't. And she has a great relationship with his family. They're great. Like, she always would have had a good relationship with them.
Was he on heroin too?
Yeah. And I would have fed his habit. And, you know, you kind of would have been forced uptown to go shoplifting in order to feed both yours and his habit. And that was... Sometimes he'd watch, or sometimes he'd be like, you can bring her fucking with you, like. And that's the thing when it comes to drugs. You don't care, you're not putting your priorities first, what you should be. You know, the drug becomes number one priority, rather than your children, you. And, you know, got to the point where my mum couldn't tolerate the drug use, and she put me out of the house when my daughter was 18 months old. I had nowhere to go. And my sister was only in a one-bedroom flat with 2 kids and her partner. And it was tiny. And I left my daughter with him on some nights, and he used to throw out a duvet and a pillow and I'd sleep in his ma's back shed. You know? And then there was a place down on the quays, and it was a warehouse, and up on top of it there was like an abandoned apartment. I was that terrified to go into hostels that I got into that and stayed there with her for 3 months. You know, there was a lad from Sheriff Street, he actually recently texted me and reminded me of this. He was only 15 and his mum threw him out, and he stayed there with me. I actually had to leave because my partner at the time came up and bet me around. And I actually then went to a hostel up near Richmond Court, and I couldn't stay there. You know, so I started looking for landlords' places, and I ended up getting one on Savile Place, and I was there for a while, but my addiction was just getting so bad, and I ended up on Eamon Street Clinic. And, you know, it was just one thing after another. The cycle of going to town shoplifting, coming back, selling the stuff, going getting drugs, you know, I wasn't even existing.
This is the question that I have. Are you existing? And even when you're getting the beatings and stuff like that, and I hate even saying stuff like that, like getting the beatings and going into, and you have a baby, does nothing else exist, only the drugs in that moment?
You still have the love for your child, like, of course that exists. You still have them moments. You're still like being a mother. It got to the point where I wasn't taking drugs to get stoned. I was taking drugs to take the pain away, to take them aches away, to take the mental pain away. Because at that point in my life, I thought that I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't able. I hadn't got the mental capacity to deal with life and the situations that had given me. And then I ended up people had moved into that house, and there was other drug addicts living in it, and you know, they were all in the halls, and I was like, I have to get out of this house. So I ended up moving to East Wall, and I just was trying so hard to get away from my ex, because you'd wake up in the middle of the night and he's forcing himself upon you, like you'd be asleep and he's trying to have sex with you, like. And for a long time it wasn't a relationship, but I didn't want to be with him. I ended up getting pregnant then on my second, and I ended up getting him out after a month of being pregnant. And I remember being in a car with someone, and he jumped on the bonnet to try and drag me and my daughter out of the car, like. So eventually then I got back with the lad that I was with before him, and he would have been my first love. And he's the father to my son. And that's another traumatic experience. We got back together. He was there for my other son when he was a baby. And my son was only 6 months he was 6 months old, and I got pregnant again. But then he got locked up for a bit. Okay. When my son was born, he was born with a lot of different respiratory problems. They said because I had the bar in my arm and the hormones off the bar. When Tig was a few hours old, I turned around and he was black in the cot. He was dead, like. So I'm running with him and trying to ring my mum and running out into the hallway, and they just whipped him off me, and like they were like, code red, or whatever they were saying. I can't even, and I just dropped the phone, and my mum's like, what's going on? And it felt like hours they were gone, and I kept asking them, where is he? So then I just got sick of it and went up, and they said, we're after bringing him back, he's in ICU and you can come in and see him now. There's just tubes hanging from everywhere. He was still blue. They didn't know what was wrong with him, and they were putting a feeding tube up one nostril, and you know, oxygen on him. And it was only then I realised that when they told me that newborn babies can't breathe through their mouth, they breathe through their nose. It was only when he was 11 days old he kept stopping breathing, having bradycardiac blue episodes, and they were like, this is very rare, it could happen from withdrawals from methadone. But it wasn't. He had a thing called choanal atresia. It's a blockage on the nose. It's very rare. Okay. So cartilage grows up the nose. So with them forcing a feeding tube up this nostril, it was stopping him from breathing. But he also had another rare one called H-type fistula. So there's two tubes, and one was crossing to the other. So every time his food was going down, it was drowning his lungs. And then he had tracheomalacia, a floppy windpipe. So it took them, they noticed one of them, and he was in hospital till he was 6 weeks. He got home, he was home for my daughter's communion, and he was only home a day or two. In the sitting room, he went grey and stopped breathing again. So I'm after skipping it. Just before he got out of hospital, his dad got a day out to visit him. The nun brought him down, he seen him, and he ran from the hospital. From the nun, yeah. But he was then later caught a day or two later hiding under a car in Sheriff Street. Yeah. But I was glad he got to see him, and
Do they treat you differently in the hospital because of the drugs? Or do they treat you like in Mother anew? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do understand why sometimes they treat it. So if you're given dirty urines, if you're clean, you know, they're not going to have the same approach if you're constantly taking drugs, you know. And then you have the likes of social workers in the hospital as well. But generally, I had a male, Justin, and he was actually lovely. And then there was another, Marion, and I actually still have contact with her to this day. You know, she done a lecture and she brought me up in the lecture of, you know, me coming in. I was a little fucker to me now, you know, and that my daughter actually works in the hospitals now.
So take me back to Tig then, and you have him home 2 days, and he...
Yeah, so he stopped breathing again and got an ambulance. It was actually the fire brigade that came. Ambulance couldn't come for, so they actually worked on him and they brought him back. And he was brought to Temple Street, where he was there for months. We had to get him christened there because the surgery that he got, the equipment was only brought into this country and they had never used it before.
Oh God.
You know, it's like a tracker, a scanning thing that goes around your head. With the cranial atresia, there's 3, it's either blindness, deafness or heart defect. Okay. Tig was 1 in a billion that didn't get any of them. You know, so it was constant time away from the other 2 kids, being up in the hospital, dropping 1 to creche and school, and I moved back to my mum's, and she was helping, and you know, constantly up in the hospital. And then he got out, and I was living in East Wall with Stevie, and he idolised him. He was only 11 months old when Stevie died. And to this day I regret. Stevie got put into custody and there was bail on him, and I paid the bail to get him out, and within a week he was killed as he lay asleep on a sofa. He was shot in the head.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Were you there?
No, I wasn't there. He left my house. It was actually on his birthday. It was actually Stephen's Day. He came into the world on a Stephen's Day and left the world on a Stephen's Day.
God.
There was actually someone that was at the being in the house with him having a drink that day, that evening. Someone that he knew. And he was the type of person that wouldn't harm a fly. You know, the most generous, kind-hearted soul that you would ever come across. And it wasn't supposed to be for him. This is the kind of thing what happens when people are involved in drugs and money and feuds. The innocent end up getting caught in the crossfire. And, you know, even though my son was only 11 months old, it still affects him to this day. You know, he goes on about his dad as if, you know, he's still here with him, and his dad's family keep the memory alive, and they are really good to him. You know, they bring him on holidays and everything, but I remember getting the call off one of Stevie's friends, And he was like, is Stevie with you? And I was like, no, I'm just, after leaving him, he left my house that day. And he was actually, I was just on my methadone. I wasn't taking anything else. And he was dying sick. And he left and got a taxi. And his friend brought the taxi down to the house and dropped him to the house. And at 7 o'clock that evening, I went over and gave him birthday cards and runners and tracksuit, and he had them on him. And like, I never forget, I fell to my knees when I heard, and I was literally there in 2 minutes. And I remember his brother and all trying to get into the house and the police there, and you could just see him lifeless lying on the sofa as you looked in the front door, and I had Tig in my arms. He didn't deserve that. He just didn't deserve it. But then you had the taunting from the person that did it. You know, you go in the shop and I blew his head open like a melon, and, you know, I couldn't be around that area anymore. I kind of slowly stopped being around there, but before I did, it was a few years later. Like, my kids went to school down there. The fella that killed my partner, I was standing at the creche when he was shot. My initial reaction was, you deserved it, you know, and I did scream, you deserved it, but also I was in shock at seeing that. And now today I'm like, his mother or his siblings didn't deserve that the same way as my partner. They didn't deserve that, you know. No one should deserve to die that way. Nobody, regardless of what you do. You know, that's so many people lost their lives through that feud. Innocent people. My partner being one of them. Tiger's just blessed he has people that keep his dad's memory alive. You know, his brother Gary is just amazing to him. And his sister, like, they do everything for him.
How did you then move out of the area? Because obviously everywhere you turned, it was memories, or it was meeting the people who did it. Like, how did you get yourself out of it?
I was living in the East Wall, and I kind of stopped kind of going into that area. And then eventually down the line, I met Ella's dad. But there was a whole different, like, I went to prison.
Okay.
And through me going to prison, my incident happened within days of that fella being shot. So guards put pressure on me by saying, if you tell us who did it, we will let your charge go away. But if you don't, we will make sure you get the maximum sentence on it.
Do you want to tell me what the incident was?
It was an assault charge.
Okay.
It happened on O'Connell Street. It's not something that I'm proud of, but happened. And I was with my partner at the time. And he was in McDonald's, I was in McDonald's. And a girl hit off me. And I suppose I went out then, there was 3 of them, and where I could have just left it at that, I went out and approached her and, you know, slammed the taxi door because they were trying to get in the taxi, and, you know, kind of demanding that she apologised because I felt wrong done by, and yeah, I was on tablets. But then it got very heated, and my partner came out and seen the male hitting me, and he literally gave one box. He got 4 years for that. But it was an incident that shouldn't have happened. You know, I don't know, I suppose I was like a caged animal fighting the three of them. And this is the repercussions of taking drugs and letting your anger take control of your life. How
long did you go away for?
I got 7 years, 18 months suspended, so 5.5 to do.
What was that like, having to get the kids?
I was found guilty, and the kids were with my mum through taking drugs. Social services were involved. So I'm after skipping a big part.
Take it back, it's okay.
Before I went to prison, I had a stillborn. And Ellie was her name. Ella's little sister. And as she was telling your husband when she came in for.
What did that do to you?
It destroyed me. And to this day, I still haven't really dealt with our debt properly. I kind of just pushed it to the side, and I can't even bring myself to go to the grave. Like having to give birth to, or having to know that, you know, you're never going to see her growing up. Knowing that you're never going to experience any memories of her. And seeing her going down in a wee box.
Take your time. Do you want to take a break?
I just became so angry at life, angry at the world. And like, I was going into the same doctor for 10 weeks, having pains and bleeding. He just kept sending me home, and I felt in my own body, I knew there was something wrong. And then my waters broke, and there was loads of blood in the house. And I don't know, when I was in hospital, I missed a court date with Tulsa with my kids, and they put in an order for my kids while I was in the hospital because I missed the court date. While I was in hospital, after giving birth to a stillborn. And I suppose I just became so angry at everyone in the world, and it's like that day I just lost everything.
Take your time. Take your time. Hard. So hard. I don't know how. I don't even have words for you, to be honest, Ruth.
It's mad because I told you I done that thing, the fire and ice, and it came up for me. And I suppose this is feeling like it's a release from talking about it, because I normally just put it to the side.
Let's take a break for a second. Come on. So we just took a break there for a second. I've no words for you. I've no words for you at all, you know. And I just said there where you were to the person you are. We will get on to what you've done now. When Ellie passed, were you still on methadone then, or?
I wasn't in active addiction, but I was on methadone. Like, I wasn't using other substances. And
is that the phrase? Am I being offensive to you by saying that you were in? Is it that you're in active addiction? Are they the words? Should I be using proper words with you?
No.
Okay. I just thought.
Like, I was still on methadone, so I was still in addiction, but I wasn't using to the extent I was before I had it. And when Ellie died, I kind of stopped using, but still on my methadone, and then I was on takeaways. And
what's takeaways?
So I'd have to go to the clinic. It's like, first it'd be, you'd only have to go a set amount of days, not every day. So you'd start off with weekend takeaways, and then the more clean urines you gave, the less you had to go.
Okay.
So then it was once a week, once every 2 weeks then, where I had cut myself down on the methadone. But then I had that charge. And
so the kids are did when Tulsa, I can never say that word. Tulsa, when they made that point, was it that the kids go to your ma's, or did they take them somewhere else?
No, they were with my mum.
Okay.
So my case was going through the courts, and I suppose they were slowly with my mum, you know, weekends, this and that. Tig was actually with his dad's family, so my mum had the eldest two, and then Tig was with them, because, you know, she had to get used to bringing them to school. She had to get used to being able to go to work and look after kids. So then eventually, after a few months, Tig went with my mum as well, so she had the three of them. My house in Eastwall, the lease was up, so there was no point on signing another lease, because the judge had found me guilty and was giving me 8 weeks grace in order to sort what I needed to sort out with the kids, and then come up and get the sentence.
What is that like? What is it like when you're being handed down a sentence like that?
In them 8 weeks, I started just being erratic on drugs.
Really?
And taking everything. And just blocking everything out, because I knew I was going away for a while. And the thoughts of being somewhere where you can't be with your kids, you can't be with your family, and just the loss of your freedom. I just delved into addiction further and further and further. So I gave the house up and I moved to Finglas to my sister's with my partner. And the time came to get sentenced, and I just put a load of drugs on my person and brought them into prison with me. And when I got the sentence, suitcase and all, to the court, because I didn't know what to expect. I don't remember my first few weeks in prison. No, because I was that high on drugs. And one of the officers actually came to me then when the drugs were kind of gone. He's like, I seriously thought there was something wrong with you. Because he said, you were standing in the yard one day and you just kind of leaned over and fell asleep on the bush. Like, I was that fighting in prison, thrown up to the nets to get drugs, and, you know, I was a disaster. Not going to the school, fighting with officers, getting locked back, getting put on punishment. I actually got sent to Limerick prison. And that's a whole different prison.
So where were you sent? And then
first I was sent to the Doka Centre in Mountjoy.
Okay.
And I wasn't there long. I think I was there 2-3 months, and I got sent to Limerick, where in the Dokas, when they open the doors in the morning, you're able to go freely until they lock them down at 7:30 in the evening. Where in Limerick, you're out, you come out and get your breakfast, and then you're gone back in, and then you're let out for a little while, and there's literally a room for recreation and a little tiny yard. Because I was down on punishment, and the time I was down there was during the summer, there wasn't school. So it's literally most of the time in your cell. So I was down there for a month.
Are you in a cell by yourself? Like, explain it to me. Or are you in a cell with other people?
When I went in there first, I shared, well, you go up into healthcare overnight and they assess you and, you know, and then put you down into the population. And
were you afraid?
The drugs blocked all that out at first.
Okay.
But then when they kind of wore off, I suppose, you know, it was a fear. I did cry myself to sleep a lot. You know, you'd get off the phone to your kids, or, you know, there'd be things going on with the kids that you can't help them with. You're missing them waking up Christmas morning. You're missing birthdays. Or if they're sick, you're not there to hold them, and just missing so much of their life. And then them being slagged because your mum's in prison and your ma's a junkie, as other kids would call it, and, you know, the effects I had on them because of my actions. That was hard for me to deal with, knowing that I put all that on them, but I have dealt with that. And so when I came back from Limerick, I kind of set myself in the cell and I was like, what do you want? What do you want from life? You know, are you going to continue to sit around the tables in the prison and thrown up at nets and taking drugs, and or are you going to change your life? Are you going to make something of yourself? So I then decided to come off my methadone and get stuck into school and the gym and do every course available to me. Once the officers kind of seen you doing that, you know, they were supporting you and guiding you along the right road. And I then got moved from the little yard up to the big yard, and, you know, you walk your way around. And then I got stuck into doing the fitness in there, and I then eventually got put up into the trustee part. It's the new part, the Willows, and you don't get locked back.
Okay.
You know, the rooms are massive, and you have, like, I don't want to make it sound like a holiday camp, because that's not what it is.
But it took you a long time to get there.
Or it took me a long time to walk my way around. And I became calmer. I done anger management, I done counselling, I done whatever it took. You know, and my family seen the difference. They seen the change. I was doing amazing in school. And then I start. My daughter was ashamed, embarrassed coming up, and, you know, so she stopped coming up for a while, and that was hard because you only get a certain amount of calls, and, you know, who do you ring? Like, if you want to ring your family or if you want to ring your kids, and you know, I kind of felt isolated there, because people move on with their life. People have their own lives. I just felt as if I was on my own. Even though my mum was a great support, she brought the kids up all the time. You know, it's just a lonely, lonely place to be in there. Now, I did make amazing friends who I'm still in contact with to this day. And they would have been people that were never on drugs. That just got themselves in situations that they shouldn't have. And the governor has seen so much potential in me, and you know, she worked her arse off to help me. And I got first it was like I got out to the waiting area to see the kids, and it was one of the kids' birthdays, so I could have cake there and sit with them for 2 hours out there and play games, because some of the visits, when it was inside, you weren't allowed to hug your kids. If you bought sweets in the shop, you weren't allowed to hand them to your kids. You had to give them to the officer. Or if I was in the leatherwork class or the glass making class, and if I made a mirror or a belt, you couldn't hand them to your kids. You know, it was all through the officers. And I do understand that that's their job. And people were passing stuff on visits, so, you know, they have to be observant to that. You know, it's not one rule for you and another for someone because you're doing well. But eventually then I start getting overnight out and spending time with my kids. And
what was your first one like?
My
Were you nervous?
day out was for my son's communion.
Okay.
And I was terrified. You know, I got ready, Courtney and my mum picked me clothes out, and one of the girls done my makeup, and another one was doing my hair, and I was petrified sitting beside people, and you know, just in case people approach me and, you know, asking you questions. I don't know, I was afraid to be in crowds, because you are so long being in the environment you were in, and it's like being under a magnifying glass. And then my mum had to drop me back, and it was like having that few hours with the kids was so special that I was able to be at his communion, because he hadn't got his dad, you know. So him knowing that I was there was special for him and me. So then when they seen that went well, then down the line I got, I can't think of father or something, I can't think of his name, it's on Ainger Street.
Okay.
And I got a day out to there. An officer brought me, and I was able to spend the day there with the kids, and there was a little kitchen, and I got to do things with them there, and my mum, and then eventually it worked towards getting an overnight, and it's hard going back, you know. And then you're applying for days out, and sometimes you don't get it. And then when you do, it's like, oh my God, I'm getting out to go with my kids, and I can do normal stuff, and then you'd have people in there like, how is she getting it and I'm not, and I suppose different circumstances. And I just worked so damn hard to change my life, and I done like the steps to excellence, I done reduce the use, I done so many different, any course that came up to do growth work, I done it. The governor and the chief would have people come into the prison, like he'd get social workers or people that wanted to be counsellors or drug addiction, and she would bring them in to speak to me and, you know, tell them where I was at and what I am now. But then that all kind of got a bit fucked up for me, because I got a weekend out and Ella's dad was just at the getting out. And they don't tell you in prison when you get out on your TR form that you can't have sexual intercourse.
Okay.
And I did. So I was actually on a medication at the time, and I went out and did, and I came back pregnant, but I was 6.5 weeks and I miscarried. So I told the governor, and it's just so hard because I don't know about now, but at that time you hadn't got the services in order to help you deal with that. You know, you were sitting in your room, bleeding, in pain, and you had to wait till the next day in order for them to get you an appointment in the hospital and bring you to the hospital, because it has to go through IPS to pass you to go out.
Okay.
And that was hard because I wasn't allowed to tell anybody, you know.
Yeah.
Me, my partner and the governor and that knew.
Did you get punished for that?
Not for that one.
Okay.
But then, I think it was 16 weeks later, I got out for a weekend and I got pregnant again. And that was on Ella.
Okay.
And I hid it. I told one girl in there, and I hid it 3 months. I started bleeding. An officer that I got on with, I went over and told her because I was panicking. And she rang down for healthcare, and I went in and, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I'm pregnant and I'm bleeding. So they rang the governor straight away, and I was brought to the hospital later that evening, and everything was okay, thank God.
And when you're brought to the hospital, Ruth, what is that like? Are you brought through with officers with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hospital appointments, you're brought through with officers. So, like, the officers are sitting in the room, and that day that I was brought to the hospital, there was 2 officers with me, and it was a male and a female, and the female demanded to be in the room when they, you know, had me stripped down, and the midwife actually asked her to leave, and she was like, no, and the midwife said, there's no windows or doors, you know, there's only one way in, one way out, and you're standing there. I remember it because it was 5:15 in the evening, and then when I was brought back to the prison, like, everyone knew, because officers do tell prisoners, you know, so everyone whispering, and so I was shitting, because then the next morning I had people pull me, and, you know, Ruth, it's in the papers. The governor called me in and, you know, gave out to me, and she said, I think you need to ring your mum. It's all over the paper. And I rang my mum. She told me to fuck off. She didn't want anything to do with me. My daughter was in the Gaeltacht at the time, and she was like, how can you do this? You haven't even got your other 3 kids. You're in prison away from them, and you're having another one. You know, everything you've worked so hard for is gone now. And for months they didn't speak to me. Now, Ella's dad was released at the time, so I had him there for support, and but where I was getting days out, they stopped that. hospital appointments. I was bleeding on and off on Ella, and because of previous, I've had a few miscarriages, and because of Ellie's death, they monitored me, so I had to go to hospital every day, twice a day, once in the morning to get tracing done, and then the afternoon for scans. And the officers were coming with me, so they hadn't got the staff to keep doing that. So they eventually then let me go myself, but the rules were you weren't allowed to have Ella's dad there with you. You weren't allowed to have contact with you, pressurising me to finish with him. And
was there resentment from the officers that they were bringing you off to do this, do you think?
They changed with me after that.
Did they?
You know, there's many men that get out and their wives get pregnant, but it doesn't happen with women. You know, and the thing that they need to offer is contraception, or put in it, don't have sexual intercourse when you're getting a day out. Got to the point where, it's sad to say this, but I didn't want to be pregnant. I didn't want her, and I was like, I just want my kids. I want my man back. I was like, I don't want to be pregnant. Just felt so lonely and abandoned, and it kind of, I cried an awful lot because I lost my college course. I was getting out to go to college, and that all stopped. I got onto my solicitor, and he got onto them, because they're not allowed to use that against you.
Okay.
You know, I didn't break any of my TR, the rules that I was given. So then I start getting things back. And then I came to the decision that I'm not bringing Ella into this prison.
Okay.
I'm not having her in here where there's paedophiles in the same yard, and once you have her there, that's on her birth cert.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that.
So I told them that I was signing her out to her dad, and they were like, no, you're not doing that. You need to bond with your child. And I was like, I can't bring her back here. I can't. Oh, it's hard enough for an adult to be in there. I didn't want for our siblings to have to come up and see her in a prison. But before, I think it was about 7 months, then I start back talking to my mum and that, and you know, my daughter started looking forward to the pregnancy. One day I was out in the yard, and the chief came over to me and he said, you're going home tomorrow. And it was 2 weeks before I was due Ella. And I was like, you're messing with me. He was like, I'm not, you're going home, but we have a place for you to go. I literally got out there with not a penny, not a baby grow. 3 weeks before I was due Ella. Had her a week early. And they brought me down to it. The rules of my TR was that I had to stay in this emergency accommodation. I walked into it, it was in Summerhill. They brought me into it. There was bars on the windows. I just wanted to go back to prison. I didn't want to be there. And the officer that brought me down, that was the one that I told that I was bleeding. I got on with her pretty well. And she was like, oh my God, how can they put you here? It was just the basement one that I was in. And I was there for 2 years. With Ella for the first few months. I couldn't even go outside the door. Interaction with people was hard. Adjusting back to life was hard. I was able to do things with Ella I didn't get to do with my other kids. Like I breastfed her. I don't think it's totally different with her. I just spent the time giving her my full attention, plus the other kids, and it kind of brought the bond closer. And I believe she's my saving grace. I honestly do. She was sent for me for a reason, because if she wasn't here, I'd probably be back on drugs. Like, I tried to commit suicide in prison and all. I cut my wrists and everything because I couldn't cope with not having that interaction with my kids when I was pregnant on Ella. And
was your mum and Ella's dad allowed in that place, or was that part of the rules that he wasn't allowed?
You were only allowed to have 5 visitors. Ella's dad was one, my mum was another, my oldest daughter was another, and my 2 boys.
And stupid question, but is there someone watching you? Like, is it?
Yeah, there's staff there, but like, I didn't, like, it's in a supported accommodation run by DePaul, and you know, you would have night staff and then you would have other staff, but I didn't really engage with them that much, because we're the support. They would be there to help you fill out medical forms. I could do that for myself. Ella was 9 months old. I applied for college. I went back to Crumlin College to do sports, fitness and nutrition, and I got her into a creche.
Just with that 9 months, and you said it did, she saved you. It must be a bond like nothing else. And I know the bond day is with all children. I totally get that. But the fact that you could do just you and her on your own, must have just felt totally...
Because I had guilt as well with Ella, because the pregnancy, I was like, I don't want this child. I don't want it. And I think it was fear because of what happened to Ellie, and the fact that I bled a good bit on Ella as well. I kind of, in the back of my mind, I was waiting for it to be the same situation as Ellie, to be told that she wasn't breathing, and because that's what, when I went in on the scan, I could see Ellie's head back like that, and the doctor said, "Oh, hold on till I get someone else," and I was like, "There's something wrong, isn't there?" And he wouldn't tell me.
And then before you talked me through about your college and stuff like that, is there, just a question, is there women in prison having babies in prison? Is there babies in prison?
There's a mother and baby unit. It's Phoenix House.
Okay.
I was up in the Willows, and then when they found out I was pregnant, I was put down from that, and I felt as if I was being punished, you know. But I was put down into the mother and baby unit, and there was one girl in there with her son at the time, and you know, the officers, when they'd come round at night to do their check, you know, she had the baby in the bed. She was given out to, and she got into trouble, and they'd be threatening with Tulsa, and I'd say to them, well, when I have my baby, you won't be telling me all my kids were in the bed with me, you know. I was terrified to have her in there. I just didn't want it.
Thank God you didn't.
Oh, I was blessed.
And then tell me about, you went on back to Crumlin College, and what did you study?
I done sports, fitness and nutrition in Crumlin College, because I've always had a love for sports, and I absolutely loved it, but it was hard. It was hard, studying and looking after Ella and being in the emergency accommodation, and you know, because there was always something in it. If people weren't fighting, your clothes were getting robbed from the washroom, and you know, they do checks, and they'd go in and they'd root around your room, and I had to pull them up many a time. You know, what are you looking in the knicker drawer for? And I actually had an incident where one of the staff, now he actually got sacked because he'd done it on 2 or 3 different females, came in and pulled the covers off you when you were in bed at night. You know, there was an ongoing investigation into him, and he actually was private texting on
Oh my God.
Messenger and took your details from your file and texted you on your phone. You know, so you think you're safe in these places, and it's not always the case. Yet there was an ongoing case, and one of the girls out there actually got removed and got housed because of him.
Jesus Christ. You think, as you said, you're safe in those places.
Yeah.
And there's predators everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So, you know, they were kind of suggesting certain things for me, and then I just came back to them. I said, I applied for college, I'm starting. And they were like, oh, you done that yourself? And they kept saying to me, you need to move on somewhere else because this isn't for you. You can support yourself. Why were you ever put in supported housing? You're independent. You can stand on your own 2 feet. Now, in there, you had to pay rent every week.
Okay.
€35. You had an ASB bill as well, which I think in most homeless accommodations, I think that should be across the board, because it then prepares you for when you do get your own place. Well, for me it did. I was volunteering with the homeless at that stage with Tiglin, because in my addiction they would have been really, really supportive to me. Aubrey McCarthy, he would have been very supportive, and even through the emergency accommodation. So I gave back to them by working on the No Books bus, and I was doing that. I was doing college. I was working out in the gym. Well, I was lucky that I could work out in the gym through college as well, and through my work experience. And it was also lifeguarding and aqua aerobics, and then it was building the trust back up with the kids, because, you know, it's like you can stay clean in prison, but can you do that when you get out? And I honestly believe if Ella wasn't here today, if I never got pregnant on her, I would be back to where I was.
Would you?
Yeah. It's hard because I had to cut ties with people and a relationship I was in order to stay clean, in order to save Ella. And I had to make hard decisions. I constantly hounded the corporation, emails, calls every day for the 6 months. But where I wanted Ringsend and City Centre, it's so sought after. So my brother said, move out. That's where you knew that your old life, that's not you now. I had made contact with my dad. I forgot to say that. When I was out on a day out, I hadn't had a relationship with him in 20 years. Through addiction, through family stuff, whatever had gone on. He had 2 other girls. And the older one, I would have been in contact with her on and off through our teenage years up. And she would have came up and visited me. And so I rang her and I said, is my dad there when I got out? And I got on the phone to him, because my family hid from me that my dad was dying of cancer. And they didn't want to tell me in prison because they didn't know what way it'd affect me. So I got on the phone to him and I told him that I loved him and I forgave him for everything, and I never stopped loving him. That just, I got so used to not having him in my life that it became normal. And he told me the same, and he told me that throughout my life he had been checking in, and my sister had been given photographs, and like he met my oldest as a baby at Roshan's christening, my sister, and then never met them again. And I kept contact with him then, and I went up and visited him in hospital, brought Ella up, and now of all his grandchildren, she was the only one he ever got a birthday card off. And she still talks to him about him to this day. Like, she met him a few times, and it's mad because I actually feel closer in death with him than I do in life, because through my Reiki and I make contact with him. And when he died, it brought all of us, my siblings and my other two sisters, together in a room that he had never experienced. Like, they were giving him his last rites on the 3rd of December, but he didn't die until the 3rd of January.
Okay.
And he had so many different cancers. And like, it brought us a relationship with his wife then. And I made a promise to him that I would always be there for the girls. And we have a good relationship with his daughters and with his wife. Ella adores the whole three of them, and my nephew. They're always there to support me in the running and any venture.
Did your dad talk about Deborah at the end of his life?
No, not really, no. Once. But he would have kind of, I suppose when you're not in someone's life for so long, you're not going to, he was after having a stroke, so his speech wasn't good. He had throat cancer or tongue cancer, you know, and also you couldn't really understand a lot of what he was saying. You know, we snuck Ella into the hospital one time, and he was in a room on his own, and he was playing little games with her, but she couldn't understand what he was saying. And Roisin was there, and his wife. I know it was Katie, actually. And she remembers that to the day. Now, she just always say, "See this bright star in the sky? That's my granddad." And he follows me around. And even though she only met him, you know, before his death, like, she still always speaks about him.
I think kids see things differently. They just feel things differently, and it's lovely.
But I went to a medium and in my cousin's house, and he came in and he spoke about Deborah then. And he spoke about different childhood memories with me, and how sorry he was, and how much he loved me, and how proud he was. You know, that meant a lot. To know that he was proud and he got to see me change my life around. And I'm so happy and blessed to have the two girls in my life as well. I love the relationship I have with them. You know, and they're very good to Ella. You know, I feel as if his death brought me back closer with his family. like my aunties and my cousin, like one of my sisters, I have a great relationship with her. She's very good to Ella. And my cousin Ashlyn, like, she's a Reiki master as well. Like, I talk to her every single day. And I believe his death brought us all back together, like. Sorry.
That's okay. Tell me about your Reiki and why you got into it and what that does for you now.
Well, my mum would have been a Reiki healer.
Okay.
What
is Reiki? For anyone who doesn't know what Reiki is, what is Reiki?
It's energy healing.
Okay.
It's healing with the hands. I'm doing this with my hands. It's just unbelievable that a person can help heal, activate other people's healing in their body and also heal themselves. My mum would have been a Reiki healer and had an angel room, and then through having my kids there, and that all kind of went. Like, my mum would have had cancer, and she believes that through Reiki and the Violet Fire that she helped heal herself. My mum has some amazing experiences psychically, and as I said to you about the feeling of losing one of her kids, and she had the same with her brother when he died Christmas Day. But for me, it was just over 2 years ago. I've always kind of been drawn to it. My mum, like about 20 years ago, would have gave me crystals and rose quartz and amethyst, and I've always kind of had them, and angel cards I have years through watching my mum do it, and guidance from her and reading. She's in abundance of books and reading all her stuff. So Courtney actually bought it for me for my birthday. I went down and done it in Bettystown with Denise. She's a grand Reiki master, and just the experiences in it and what it does for you in life. But then COVID hit, and I stopped bringing people into my house to do it, and you know, I concentrated more on my running.
And that's where Jennifer came in. Do you like then? But you already knew Jennifer years ago, did you?
I know Jennifer since I hung around in Sherry Street. I would know her family, and she lives not far from me. So when I moved out to Ballyferma, my dad had just passed, so I didn't move into the house till 6 weeks later.
Okay.
And I didn't know anyone. My brother lived around the corner. I was grieving and I was isolating myself, and I was at there. My dad died, and the week of my dad's death, I finished a 10-year relationship.
Okay.
With Ella's dad. So I was kind of all over the place. Didn't know anyone. Isolated myself in the house. I felt suicidal. I actually cut my wrists. I thought, my brother's a medic in the army. I actually told him that I put my hand in the sink and the knife went up, and you know, so his wife told me that her uncle was running in a running club, and she drove me up then, and from then on I started back with the running, and that was over 3 years ago. And I was coaching up there for 2 years. I'd done the Athletics Ireland coaching courses with them, and I just grew a passion for it. And meeting the people that I've met through it.
What does it do to you? Like, what Oh, like for the outsider looking in going, it's just running. It's not just running.
For me, it's a sense of freedom. It's taking life at your own pace. It's showing me that I'm strong, that no matter what distance I put in my head, that I can achieve. And by doing them distances, it's given me mental strength. You know, not just physical strength, but mental strength to be able to deal with things in life. Sometimes I will have a problem and I'll just throw on the runners and I'll get out and run, and I feel like I can deal with my problems better through the running. Don't get me wrong, the running can be tough at times. I'm not saying like running is easy all the time, but the rewards and the benefits you get from it far outweighs the struggles that can occur. And through running, like, it has built Ella into such a strong-minded child. I've met the most amazing people, i.e. Rosie and Jennifer. That have became my best friends. I done my first marathon for Rosie. We've went to every one of Rosie's races because how could you not love that kid? And her and Ella are as thick as thieves. Like, she's just such a character. And like, me and Jennifer would talk all the time, and we'd build each other up. And you know, she'd get out and support me on my races, on my runs, and when she's training or doing her runs, I'll get out and support her. And I just have met people that never in your wildest dreams that you think that you would meet through running. I've met the most amazing friends who are like family. And like, running is the gift that keeps on giving for me. Through running, I've met people that...
Lots of giggling going on in the background, so apologies if you can hear. There's so much giggling going on in the background. I can only imagine what they're doing, but yeah, lots of giggling going on. Go on, sorry, tell me.
It has introduced me to people that are involved in the spiritual aspect of things, and that's down on Portmarnock Beach. And the likes, you have Paddy Douglas that's doing the Wim Hof, you have Shani, Mind Yourself, you have Kelly, and that's doing the Reiki. You have me buddies Jo and Josh Hayes that are just so inspiring. And there's just so many people to mention, but you know, they don't judge anyone. They are showing people a better quality of life through running, through yoga, through breathing, through swimming in the ocean. You know, I've ran with the lads from Inner City who I put up there on a pedestal. I've ran with Trotters Running Club, who helped me and Ella immensely through the pandemic and supported Ella when she done her running challenge where she ran every day. In January, I've ran with Clondalkin Flyers, who are another unbelievable club, and Cherry Orchard. You know, Kenna, he started me off on my running journey. So all these amazing clubs I'm grateful for. All these people on Portmarnock. If I forgot anyone, please don't kill me.
Tell me about, because I think we probably have about 10 minutes left before these two bull down the stairs. Tell me about, you're involved with something with, I think, Ger Redmond, about giving back, and the governor asking you to do things. And
so I coach people in recovery through the running with Hope on Buckingham Street, where Irene and Joe are amazing. They help people in recovery, homelessness, so many different things across the board. And for Recovery Month, they got me in last year as well, and now I'm there permanent. And I was coaching the girls, and we went up along the canals and bumped into, she was a chief at the time in the Docus, and she seen me and she was like, oh my God, Ruth, you look amazing and what you doing? So we were talking for a few minutes, and Irene was there and she was telling her, she was like, I need to get you in, I have something for you down the pipeline, and we have a male that does it in the mails. And I was like, yeah, Jerry Redmond, I know. And she was like, oh my God, you know him. So I had done a course in the prison with a woman called Adrienne Hayes, Steps to Excellence, and she facilitated quite a few different courses in the prison that I partook in. And it's all positivity and, you know, learning to deal with certain aspects in life. So she put me on to Adrienne and Northside Partnership, and there's a place called Get the Message Out. So we done an online event where Jer spoke and I spoke, and it's about intimidation, violence, drugs, to try and hit people before they get to that point where they end up in prison. And then you had Brandon and Minty, he's skateboarder. Brandon does
Dublin homeless.
Yeah. So they're all ambassadors as well for it. So it's basically, it's new and it's helping people to get that message out there. And like, you had Wayne Hart get on a podcast. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the one.
You can.
Talking bollocks.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I like the boys. I like what they do.
Yeah. So you had him as well get out and speak for them. There was so many different people that are involved in it. John Connors, and it's amazing because I've already had people approach me on how to get help, how to change their life, how to get out of addiction. And the feedback from doing it was unreal, and I was so nervous doing it. But my whole thing is, if it can even reach one person and help one person, and then it can have that ripple effect where that one person goes and helps someone else, you know, and gradually the next generation, you know. So yeah, it's a great cause, and you know, Jared does amazing work. He really does. So the governor had asked me, would I be up for doing things in the prison? And I said, yeah. And then when I was with you the other day, when I done the Hope Run for Recovery, which Inner City helped us out massively with that. And then we went to Kelly after it. I actually met an officer there, and she's chief, and she asked me, could I come in and do things as well? And I had told her, and she said, I know Governor Kelleher had already spoke to me about you, and like, not many women stay on the path, you know. They're constantly, it's a revolving door, you know, so we need someone to be a voice for the women. And I said, yeah, of course. I'll definitely do that.
You're changing the world. You really are. Do you know that?
Start with changing yourself first.
And you have.
But for a long time, and I said this to you earlier, I used to say prison saved me. But as it was pointed out to me, I used this as tools and I saved me. It's personal choice. If you want to stay in that environment, you know, you have the control. It's up to you to change that. And I've so many people guide me along the way where it's family. My brother would be a great role model to me, and he would always push me in the right direction. And then Ashlyn, like through the spiritual path, my cousin, my daughter, Courtney, you know.
Tell me about Courtney. What is she doing now? Very proud.
Yeah, Courtney is in her 3rd year in midwifery.
Where?
In Trinity College.
Do you know what I mean?
It shows you that a child coming from addiction can be anything they want. She's my best friend. I have an amazing relationship with Courtney. You know, I had a lot of guilt around Courtney. You know, putting her through certain things in life. And yet, you know, she'll send you the odd text and she'll say, do you know, I'm so proud. Because at first she was angry with me. She was like, I have to build that trust back up with you. You know, you have to prove to me. And then you would get the odd dig of, you left me and went to prison. You know, and I'd say, but I'm here now. It took time to build that back. Because she would have been my number one for so long. Me and her for years together on our own. She's just the most unbelievable kid. Well, she's a woman now, she's not a kid.
I know.
Yeah, we fight like cats and dogs sometimes, but like she's on the spiritual journey as well. She has went to different things with me. She went to Jasmine's forest ceremony, and where there was Reiki and Shakti dancing, and you know, that's another powerful woman that guides me as well. You know, there's so many of them that I'm grateful that have came into my life. I just hope I'm not forgetting anyone.
Now, do you feel that you're blessed now? Would you say that? Is that a word you'd use in your life?
Don't get me wrong, I do have bad days, but I've learned to embrace them more and accept that it's normal to have bad days. It's not a bad life. I am blessed. I have a roof over my head. I have family. I have friends. I have food in my press. I have air to breathe. You know, I'm grateful for all of that. Like, the material things don't matter. You know, like, and the last few months, I've done a lot of healing and a lot of work on myself that needed to be done, because I locked everything away in a box. And I was like, I don't have to deal with that. But I did. And I've shocked myself at how strong I am. Because, like, one day in May, I decided I was suffering really bad with my mental health. And I decided that, fuck this, I'm going to do 60k to show me how strong I actually am. And my friend Hugo decided the day before, like, I'm going to do that with you. And another lad cycled with us. And I went out and done it. And it just showed me that no matter what roadblock comes in my life, I can go around it. I can go over it. I can go under it.
You can go through it.
Yeah.
You could go through it.
That it's not going to stop me mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. That I can get through no matter what. And that's what that run done for me.
And on that note, with all the noise in the background and everything going on, we leave it there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ruth, I wasn't expecting this, because we didn't have I was told that I needed to talk to you, and then you were told you should talk to Rebecca, so I wasn't expecting that.
There's so much that I couldn't say. I just don't want to offend others. But look, it wasn't it as well. Even though it was part of my journey and part of my story, it was their story as well. So I couldn't delve into that.
No, and that's okay, because what you've done here today, as you said, if we can help one person with this, and you've opened my eyes to a lot of things and to my thought and my what I think about certain people, or you know, people's addiction and stuff like that. So thank you, because you've educated me.
Yeah, addiction suppresses a lot for people. It changes behaviours, traits, you know, and gradually you learn to deal with that, whether it's through NA, spirituality, running, you know, through God. You know, people use all different avenues to deal with them. But people do recover. You know, it is possible to change your life. There's so many prime examples of that.
Absolutely. And you're the perfect example of it, in my opinion.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for sitting with me.
Thank you.